today, virtually and live, and other words, it's a new world, so we see a lot more things happening on Zoom. We do them quite a bit in our organization. When we can all get back to hanging out in the same room, I think that's will make us all a lot happier. And when the days that we can get away from the masks, I think the sooner that that happens, the faster we'll see a lot of everything relax in our nation. A little background on me and our organization. They're going to test me to see if I can stay in camera range. So this is my test to see if I can keep my feet anchored. I typically like to move around a little bit, so I'll do my level best so that the folks operating the camera don't have to shift too far around. Ionogen is a Knoxville, Tennessee company. What we do is we manufacture devices, solutions, and equipment both for delivery and the manufacturing of hypochlorous acid. The company was founded a couple of years ago. The chairman of our company is a gentleman pictured behind me, Dr. Virgin Overholt. You'll hear me talk a lot about doctors today because I'm not one. I'm an engineer designer by trade. But this organization that I'm proud to lead is governed by physicians. We're going to talk a lot about it because regardless of what your position is, what you have to do, where you have to go today, it is a different world for sanitizing and different disinfecting. And we have to think of it in different terms. So one of the things I want to say, well, I've got Dr. Overholt's image up here, is COVID is something to be respected. It's something to be understood, but I don't want you to be afraid of it. Best advice I can give you is turn off your favorite national media or your local media. Stop watching the news people. News people aren't physicians either, and 90% of the physicians you will see on national news media don't practice medicine. And they don't have any clue as to what's going on. SARS-CoV-2 is the illness you get to get COVID-19. SARS-CoV-2 isn't new. Everybody goes, oh, this was something new. It isn't new. COVID viruses have been around for a long time. There are variations of strains on it. It's a variation of the flu. Most everybody you know or has ever known knows somebody who's had a bad case of the flu. And people get very focused on this and they say, no, it's totally different. We will talk about why it's different. But unless you are immune compromised, you have multiple sclerosis, you have COPD, you have some other underlying health condition, you needn't to be afraid of this. You should respect it. You should understand it. But we're going to talk about really the simplicity and the difference of how we deal with SARS-CoV. And by the way, to give you some peace of mind, dealing with SARS-CoV isn't going to be any different than dealing with the flu. I want to put a couple of things into perspective. In the United States, every single year, 67,000 people die from the flu. 67,000 people die from the flu. Every single year, for the last 10 years, 110,000 people die from hospital-acquired infections. You go in, they have simple knee surgery, you get a staph infection, and you die. So while you're watching the news and Anthony Fauci's losing his mind, and the health department's losing his mind, and the governors are losing their minds, we lose 170,000 people every year on average for the last 10 years from those two illnesses. Those two illnesses. We never, in the history of the United States, tested whole communities for the flu. Ever. In the history of the nation. But now, it's become the thing to test for SARS-CoV-2. Knowing you have it, for most of you, will mean two things. If I get it, what's going to happen is I'm going to lose my sense of smell for about 2 weeks. I'm working with a group of college students at the University of Tennessee. You talk about trying to quarantine people. They're all good kids. They're students. They're in a fraternity. They went to a party about 2 months ago. Guess what? About a dozen of them got COVID. They're all college kids. They quarantined up. We exposed them to a treatment program. I'll show you here in a little bit. And you know what's interesting? Not one of them died. Not one of them got terribly sick. They all lost their sense of smell. A couple of them got lethargy. It is something to be respected, but it is also not the deadly bubonic plague that we've all been led to believe. So we'll talk about how we deal with that. My background is I have been in the environmental sanitation industry since 1982. This is all I've ever done. Primarily on the equipment side of the industry. About 20 years ago, I was exposed to an opportunity to bring technology in cleaning, not so much in sanitizing, into this industry. And it was at a time when green cleaning, those of you who've probably heard of green cleaning, it was starting to become in vogue. We were going to change up how we were going to get rid of chemicals and things, and this was kind of an interesting technology, kind of light duty. It was incorporated into a family of automatic scrubbers, still is. There's ins and outs about it. People love it or they hate it. It's one or the other. But that led me, after working with universities like Georgia Tech, West Point, huge school districts across the state of California, it led me to a place in my career where when that product, which I didn't own the company, I was just part of it, that product went away, we had hundreds and hundreds of customers who called up and said, please bring that back. Could you show us how that could function and how we could resolve this? And I said, absolutely, we'd be happy to do that. So about 7 years ago, it's actually 9 years ago now, I created a company that took the first Hypochlorous, and we're going to talk about Hypochlorous today, but these machines have been around for a long time, and Hypochlorous has been around for a long time, but I took that technology from the size of a refrigerator to the size of a blender. And about 2 years ago, with the help of Dr. Overholt, I refounded a new company in Knoxville, Tennessee, to take that technology to the next level. So this is all I've done. This is my life's work, and it's the focus of where I put my time, my attention, and my efforts. Let's talk about this solution, hypochlorous acid. Very often I run across people and they say, is this something new? Did you invent it? It was first discovered in 1872, and while my 20-year-old son believes that's when I was born, it's not true, I'm not quite that old. It was actually founded by a guy named Michael Faraday. Faraday was working with Nikola Tesla. They were trying to move electricity through water. They got electricity into salt water, and they got a stinky stream of stuff. They didn't know what that was. You would know that as chlorine. You and I would know it as chlorine. The other side was sodium hydroxide. You know that as Drano. They had no idea what it was. Chlorine isn't identified until 1901, so they have no idea what they have. Fast forward to post-World War II, hypochlorous shows up in Japan and in Russia. There were no synthetic chemicals available. They knew they had salt water, they knew Faraday's work, and they invent the first reactors. By 1980, the machines are as big as refrigerators. They can't make much more than a couple hundred parts per million of what we call HOCl. By the time we get to 2000, they haven't improved at all. The reliability of the machines are dreadful, and it kind of loses fanfare. Hypochlorous, for those who are not familiar with it, is the sister chlorine to what you know as bleach. Bleach lives at a pH level between 8 and 14. Hypochlorous can only live at a pH level between 3 and about 6.8. It is an ideal solution. It's highly, highly effective. Now you will see as I go through this presentation, again and again and again, MD, MD, MD. And if you're in the facilities environmental business, you say, why does he have so many doctors here? The first line of what's known as the Hippocratic Oath, the oath you sign to be a doctor, says, do no harm. Do no harm. Doctors start with every medical procedure understanding that if the procedure is worse than the illness. So we always go with any of the solutions that we have to our Science and Medical Advisory Board, of which there are 7 doctors. Some are pulmonologists, heart and lungs. Some are ear, nose, and throat. That's every part of the body. Internists, even an endocrinologist, which are the doctors that study disease. They sit on our medical advisory board, and so when we bring something out and we're going to introduce something new and innovative, or we're going to try it in a new application, we always ask the physicians first, will this cause harm? And so we'll talk about that as we go along. Hypochlorous is this highly effective superoxidized solution. It is taking chlorine and making it super effective. Now, very often when I talk about this, and even my contemporaries in my own company say, ooh, John, that word is so scary, chlorine, it makes us afraid. So I always ask people, certainly you've all swam in a swimming pool. No one goes to the edge of the pool and says, am I going to burn myself? We dive into swimming pools. As a matter of fact, in the last 20 years, the swimming pool industry has had an enormous renovation. In the old days, the pool guy would come out and he would pour a little bleach into your pool and you would off-gas it, and you'd swim in there, and you'd get nice orange hair, your bathing suit would change color, your skin would all dry out, and that you just accepted that. That's not the way we do swimming pools today. We do what is known as salt water swimming pools. These are hypochlorous pools. You put rock salt into a tiny reactor that makes a low level of it. You never have to shock the pool. The pool is at the same concentration all the time. You can swim under the water with your eyes open and not burn your eyes. Matter of fact, it's such a reliable technology today that Jacuzzi, the hot tub people, put it in all their hot tubs because they don't want you putting chemicals in there ruining their plumbing. So Hypochlorous is not innovative in that respect. The idea behind this is that we want to find stuff, as John alluded to, that can actually kill germs without killing us. It's fairly important. Doesn't sound like that should be too hard to do, but we'll talk about how challenging that really is. We want to be able to use solutions that are as effective and quickly effective so that we can accomplish our goal. Hypochlorous is 80 to 200 times more effective than bleach on bacteria. I know a lot of times we hear virus, virus, virus. By the way, more people die of bacterial infections than viral infections. You've all heard of flesh-eating bacteria and things like this. Those are far more aggressive. The things that kill you in hospitals, what we call hospital-acquired infections, those are usually and typically bacterial infections. As a matter of fact, there's a concern by the World Health Organization and the National Institutes of Health that if we don't figure out how to properly sanitize and disinfect by 2050, we'll have 10 million people die a year from antimicrobial resistance. Part of that is the doctors are prescribing way too much in antibiotics. When I was younger, the doctor would say, here, have penicillin, have ampicillin, have amoxicillin. Today they can't prescribe any of those because none of them work. Now we get Z-Paks, and even Zithromax doesn't work today. And there are no new antibiotics in development. So we have to kill the germs on the surfaces or where they linger to come and harm us. I know from a distance you won't all be able to see this, but this is a list of germs. I always call it the eye chart. And this is funguses, viruses, bacteria. Artie McMillan can share this information with you. Hypochlorous has been tested across all of these fronts. And it's been proven to be effective in a minute or less on all of these at the strength that Ionogen and IonoPure, our product line, creates. So one of the things that's unique about trying to help folks manage their environment is now you've made the solution, and that's great. Now you've got to find a way to deliver it. So just as a quick side note on COVID, in case you're wondering that I pulled this out of my ear, hypochlorous acid is recommended by the National Institutes of Health, Center for Disease Control, World Health Organization, because chlorine has been accepted that at 500 parts per million, which is nothing, that it can be used to remediate or get rid of COVID. So we'll, just as a side note, we always annotate any of our science studies with the actual people who wrote the document. So here's some of the greatest challenge we have today. When we look at how we environmentally manage our buildings, very often today we hear, hey, we want you to take this bottle and a rag, and I want you to spray the surface, and I want you to wipe that whole area. So yesterday I was speaking to a group of schools in Hillsborough, Illinois, and we were talking to the bus drivers first, and then we got to talking to the people who actually run the schools. And we were talking to the bus drivers, and they said, yeah, you know, what they are asking us to do is to spray down the seats and do this. And these weren't the most fit people I've ever seen, and bending down and getting under bus seats was going to be a real challenge. So we needed to find a more efficient way to deliver the solution. Same challenges faced with their school people. So we walk into public schools today, and you have all seen this. You've seen the poor hapless principal on TV standing in front of the TV saying, well, I know we closed the school, but now we're going to disinfect the school. What were they doing before? Using chocolate sauce? Of course they were using a disinfectant in the school. They just weren't using it properly. Most traditional disinfectants require some level of dwell time. My favorite example is if you ever pick up a tub of Lysol wipes and you turn it around, and the print is about a 4-font print. And it says on the back, if you want this to disinfect, you've got to keep the surface wet for 4 minutes. You can keep a surface wet with a wipe. Try it sometime. I'll buy you a beer if you can figure out how to do it. You wipe it, it dries instantaneously. That's where the germs learn and adapt. One of my wife's favorite movies is the movie Jurassic Park, and there's a clever line from that movie that applies to what we're seeing with COVID today. In that movie, the scientist says, well, we tricked the dinosaurs. We're going to make them all girls so they can't reproduce. And Jeffrey Goldblum looks at him and he says, nature finds a way. You cannot trick nature. If you do not properly disinfect surfaces, if you do not properly get the bioburden off the surface, you will have COVID. You will have norovirus. And what you're seeing with products that have been around since the 80s is you're seeing this. By the way, prior to 1980, globally, but primarily here in America, America was on what was called the bleach standard. Prior to 1980, most disinfection, about 85% of disinfection in the United States, was done with a cleaner, some sort of a general purpose cleaner. You clean the surface and then you'd use some variation of bleach. They stopped doing that right after a guy named Dr. Bill Rutala said, no, you can use a Lysol wipe. University of North Carolina microbiologist. He and Lysol and the other guys all got together, Clorox, and said, we don't want to do a two-step program. And we started using quaternary disinfectants. Now remember, I work for doctors. I work for doctors. That's who runs the board of my company. And I will simply tell you that these products, while they've been in the industry for years, are harmful to human health. It's also akin to using Easy Off in the oven. It's so common to find retired professional custodians who retire with COPD, they retire with dermatitis, they retire with a whole host of health issues, not because I'm giving you any kind of competitive mischief, but I can walk you through 5 universities which will show you that this is harmful to human health. Now imagine if you're the person who's in the school with a quaternary disinfectant doing that every day. Every single day. What does that look like after 30 years in the industry? You can't do it. You can't breathe these things. They're harmful to human health. So we have to have alternatives. And the other change that happened after the 1980s shift away from chlorine was, and I always find this very funny, I grew up in a little town on the north side of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a little town called Mequon, Wisconsin. I'm 59 years old. They never closed schools. They never closed schools. I had never heard of a flu closing for schools till about 10 years ago. Now, about 35% of the schools in the United States close for flu. 35% for the flu. I live in Knoxville, Tennessee. Our county schools in Knoxville have closed 4 years in a row. I run a private company. If that guy worked for me, I'd fire him. Closed the schools for the flu 4 years in a row. You know the definition of insanity. It's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. The schools are filthy, and we're going to talk about how a dirty school makes sick children in just a second. The reality of it is when you give products to people that make them sick or cause them to be ill, they might not know it right at 8 o'clock in the morning when they're using it, but when they go home at 4 in the afternoon and they're exhausted and they don't feel right, that's not just maybe because they're not the best physical specimen, it's because the products make them sick. So one of the guidance pieces that we do at our company is we simply don't make products that'll make you sick. So this is a sanitizer. We would never make a product that if I got it in my eyes, or more importantly, I always tell people, now that I'm an old man, I have grandkids. We use this at all of my family's home. I have 5 kids and my 2 grandkids. I would never, ever permit our organization to make a product that could harm my grandkids. And that's what I always tell our engineers and our chemists. If it can't be used in my children, we're not putting it into the marketplace. Because it's irresponsible to do that. And I know, by the way, I get it. I get it. A lot of people say, well, these are 100-year-old companies. They would never poison us. Well, I would tell you that that's what Monsanto and Bayer said, who own Roundup. That's what they said. That's a 100-year-old company. And Roundup is a cancer-causing product. It flat out simply is. And so these products made by some of these old brand companies have been around a long, long time, doesn't mean they're safe. We know that we can take SARS-CoV off of surfaces with hypochlorous acid. We can get a good and effective kill. But let's look at how we deliver that to the surface. It has to be unique. So again, if we go back to that old trigger bottle, you got a 4-inch stroke on that trigger bottle, you got to pull it like this. By the way, Ecolab did a study about 8 years ago. They said the average custodian pulls a trigger 80,000 times a year on average. 80,000 times. Ecolab study, not for me. One of the things that we needed to create was not only a safe and healthy solution, but an easier way to get things down. So what we did is we created mini misters in a spray bottle that's completely unique. You can lay this on its side, you can completely lay it down. The liquid can't get out of it, but it allows me to simply deliver this in a very fast fashion. So when we were talking to the school bus folks yesterday, and I said, we've got a beautiful power mister and we make it in a battery, and one of the ladies said, man, I don't have the greatest shoulders, I don't necessarily think I can handle this. I said, if I gave you this, could you walk across an area and do this? And she said, I sure could. I said, could you spray the driver's compartment down? She said, I sure could. So we look for other ways, because here's what has changed. And it will never go back. This is the part of the learning and the improvement of the health of our country that will never ever go back. In the old days, pre-COVID, we would say, go get the head janitor. Bobby threw up in the room, and the head janitor puts on his cape and his red boots, and he's Superman, and he comes in, and don't worry about sanitizing the tables. John will come in and do it. We have John the Magic Custodian. Those days are over. We are all part of the answer to the program. And it's not just masks. It's really simple stuff. You go and you get in your car and you pump up gas. By the way, the gas pump is about the most contaminated device next to money you'll ever touch. You get a good hand sanitizer, you get done with filling up your car, you just do this. Sanitize your hands. Because you can't go wash them. The gas station's probably filthier than the gas pump. So you go wash your hands. That's what we do. In the school district yesterday, you know what they did is they took an innovative approach. They're going to have the custodians come in and use a power mister, and I'll show you that in a second. But you know what they did? They outfitted all the teachers with these. And they said, when the kids leave the classroom, would you be willing to just simply do this? I asked the head of maintenance, I said, what was the response? He said, the teacher said yes. Will it make me sick? No. Will it hurt my clothes? No. Give me it. That's how we become part of the solution. At Ionogen, we refer to that as the misting of us, meaning the misting of the U.S. We need simple products that are not toxic, that are not harmful, that we can all use. I would put this in the hands of my 2-year-old grandson, who thought it was actually more funny to do that than to spray the table. Now that's what a 2-year-old would do. But it happens, and we can't have products that are harmful or dangerous. But now one of the things that's changed is we have to find another way. Oh, I was just going to use that. Oh, you're going to load it for me? Okay. And then one of the other things that's changed is how do we treat a bigger area, a larger area? Well, one of the things that we've done in the past is we've taken power misters and we've gone in and we've power misted a room. So we go in and we spray a whole room down. Now that's great. That's really, really effective. Oh, John, that's funny. And that will allow us to go in and remediate, which means remove, a large area. And so, thank you, sir. And so we can take a device like this and we can go in. Highly effective way to go in and get rid of the bioburden. I'm going to talk about that in a second. And the germs on the surface. We're taking the same solution we're using in here and essentially covering a big area. Let me talk about bioburden for just a minute. So they make these devices. They got one here for me, and I'll just open this box up. It's kind of a clever little thing. About 25 years ago, we created these little devices, and they're called ATP meters. It's kind of a cool little device. You take what looks like a Q-tip, and you go to a surface and you give it a little wipe. You kind of wipe it down. Then you drop it in here, and you close this thing, and it'll give you a numeric value. They started in the food industry 25 years ago. They didn't even use it in the cleaning industry. They were trying to see if the kitchen counter where they were making your cheesesteak was actually covered in germs. This measures a solution called adenosine triphosphate. It's a natural occurring organism or part of your body. We can measure dirt and filth. We can't measure actual germs, but we can measure the dirt. It's called bioburden. Bioburden, according to Dr. Overholt, is the slime that's left behind when germs die and when we leave other residues on a countertop. So you might look at all the tables in this room, and you might say, these look great, they're fine. And you take an ATP meter and you give it a rub, and you put it in here. This meter will read 0 to 50. That's okay, you're fine. 50 to 100, a little bit cheeky. Over 100, not so good. We did a test in Knoxville, Tennessee, on both a gastrointestinal clinic and a school. So at the GI clinic, I always tell people you would like your doctor's office to be clean. The good news was it was clean. We tested it, it was 11.7. We took this mister with the disinfecting solution and we sprayed the treatment room down. And the number went from 11.7 to 1.7. You go, okay, why is that so impressive? The number was good to begin with. We took that data, we handed it to a PhD in mathematics, and he came back and he said, you know what? That equals the wiping cleaning of a surface without ever touching the surface. You see, we never ever wiped the surface. So then we said, let's go find someplace dirty. So we went to Knoxville County Schools. We took Chilhowie Elementary, built in 74, and Sunnyview, built in 76. And we went in and we ran some meter testing. And so when we run the meter testing, remember what I said, 0 to 50, okay, 50 to 100, not so good, 100, terrible. The count in Sunnyview, take a guess, what do you think the count was in Sunnyview?
120.
Take a guess.
130.
7,000. 7,000. That school was uninhabitable for human life. The other school, 5,000. By the way, I hate to say it about my own town, but they put the lowest dollar per child per year into cleaning their schools. They also are grossly understaffed. They know it, and they know I'm an outspoken critic of them. Always protect the kids first. So we went in and we took the power mister, we misted out the school. We did it over a 30-day period. We left Chilhowie alone, but we did Sunnyview. Sunnyview goes from 7,000 to 191. It stays there for the rest of the school year. What we did is we took away the food that the bacteria lives on, called bioburden. Now this won't take poop off a toilet seat. If you have poop on a toilet seat, you still got to go clean. If you got vomit on the floor, you got to clean that up. But every surface is covered with some form of bioburden. We have to find other ways to deal with that. But one of the questions I always get, and I've been doing this a long time, is with these devices, somebody will say to me, hey John, this is great. Matter of fact, it happened yesterday twice. How often should we do this? And my question is always the same. You letting people back in the building? Yeah, oh yeah, the kids are coming back tomorrow. Well, that means the germs come back tomorrow. Well, so it means we got to do it every day? Well, probably not every day, but during the flu season, new infections are going to come into the building all the time. Well, John, you don't understand, we don't have a lot of people. And I said, okay, there's a lot of different kinds of misters. There's close-in misters, cordless, battery. They're good. You got to get in sort of close. These are fairly quick. You can stand in the back of the classroom. They're fairly quick. But then COVID comes along. And COVID decides to throw a little bit of a curveball at us. You've all seen the news reports over the last few weeks. We always hear about surface disinfecting, touching the tables, touching surfaces. We got to disinfect the tabletops. But COVID had a different idea. What the doctors now know is that COVID lives up here. So you can go disinfect all the toilets, all the counters. You can disinfect all of them. That's wonderful, but that's not how COVID travels. That's not why we're wearing masks. We're not wearing masks because you're going to get COVID from the tabletop. In fact, in my town, sadly, our idiot mayor is this Friday, happens to be my wedding anniversary, decides to close all the bars in Knoxville again because they think the bars are the problem. Unbelievable. The problem is the air. The problem is the air in the corporate offices. The problem is the air in the shopping mall. The problem is the air in the grocery stores. If the mayor was really concerned, what she would do is close every grocery store. Close every CVS. Close every Home Depot. Close every Lowe's. Because that's as much of an exchange as you're going to find in a cavern. It is. So how do we deal with this amorphous thing? How do we deal with the air? Can't see it. Can't touch it. So what we did as a company is we decided to see, could we get COVID out of this. Because if you could get COVID out of this, then it would land, then the product you're using would land on the surfaces, and maybe, just maybe, you'd get a result. So we hired a third-party lab in Florida, and they have a room that's a box. And what they did is they put this humidifier, you'll see this thing sort of running behind me passively. They put this purity device in that room. This is nothing more than humidified hypochlorous acid, again, so totally safe that I could put my face in this and just leave it there. They put it in that box, and then they took COVID and they blasted it into the room for 40 minutes, continuously. Not like you cough, continuously they blasted it into the room. While they were doing that, they put down human cell cultures, real cells out of human beings, down in that room. We call that cytotoxicity. Fancy word means cell health. If it's toxic, cyto means cell. So we run this test, and the lab report that comes back says that we can take 95% of COVID-2 out of the air. 95%. So that's interesting. That's nifty. There's the testing. Very, very low. We run cytotoxicity on human cells because, remember, start out with first do no harm. We give that data back to the physicians. The physicians come back and say that after 12 hours of exposure at 50 ppm, which you could never get this room to because there's air conditioning, there's zero cytotoxicity. Zero. So if you put these foggers, and you see one running over there by Shannon, you put these foggers in public schools, bars, grocery stores, whatever, you won't have COVID hanging in the air. Then we can throw all those silly masks away. The reality of it is, we know this works. How do you know it works, John? In the peak of the outbreak in Knoxville, Tennessee, where our corporate headquarters were, we were contacted by Bart McFadden, who's the executive director of the Boys and Girls Club. When flu hit us in the fall, about November, our schools closed. This was the 4th year. And Bart's daughter, who's a teenager, he got a pretty bad case of the flu. He called me on a Friday. He said, "Hey, John, I know you use these humidifiers when people are sick. My daughter's got the flu. Could I borrow one of those?" And I said, "Yeah, understand, not a doctor. Not a doctor. Yes, I use them for my own family, and we use them for other people. You're welcome to come get it." Bart comes running over, picks up one, takes it home Friday night. Sunday morning, Lisa and I are getting ready to go to church. The phone rings. He says, "She's cured." And I said, "I'm sorry?" He said, "My daughter's fine. She feels great." I said, "Okay, well, that doesn't always happen that way, but I'm glad she feels fine." He said, "No, it's amazing. COVID hits, we close all the schools. Boys and Girls Clubs have 5 individual buildings that aren't run inside the schools. They called me up and said, 'John, we can't close. We can't close because we serve moms and dads that are single parents. And if they don't have someplace to go with their kids, they can't go to work.'" I said, "Consider it done. We'll outfit you with these devices." They had their first case of COVID 2 weeks ago. We kept them open during the entire outbreak. Our mayor asked us to reopen the YMCA's. We did. We've opened up almost every church back in Knoxville by putting these humidification units in those churches. And yes, people do sing in these churches. What we've done is we've found a way to purify the air. You'll see, like you see in this room, a little bit of an ethereal fog hanging around. Doesn't harm the electronics, doesn't harm my clothes, won't hurt the machinery, doesn't bleach out or harm any of the carpeting. But what it does do is it grabs every single viral particle out of the air. And it does that. How does it do that, you say? Hypochlorous is a moist particle. It's floating through the air. COVID is a moist particle. This just gets over the top of it. Let me give you a more simple understanding. In a hypochlorous swimming pool, it's an even chlorine solution. Bobby jumps in the hypochlorous swimming pool. Like all small boys, Bobby decides that he's going to pee in the pool. We don't worry about that because the hypochlorous neutralizes the bacteria and Bobby is safe, and the rest of the people swimming in the pool are safe. Same concept with this. So I'm going to try to show you this in a little bit of an animation. See if I can do this. I got the computer to play with me yesterday. I'll see if I can get it to play with me today. I mean, try. Are we on this computer, John, or which computer?
Yeah, that's the PowerPoint.
Okay. Well, it's funny. It's not moving down the screen. Okay, it doesn't. So, anyways, well, what this animation, which is on our website, depicts, sorry about that, folks, and you won't be able to see it, is we've taken the cough animation that came from Europe about 3 months ago, where they show somebody coughing, and the bug floats through the air and it goes over the gondolas and everything else. We've taken that same animation, put our Purity devices in there, and you can see how Purity actually grabs it and takes it right out of the air. We know this to be a fact because we ran this at a third-party lab. That's
It shows that I have internet, so.
That's all right. We'll just move it along. Let's see if it'll play with it. Now, of course, it's going to give me a hard time.
You gotta use the mouse. I got the.
I'm trying. Oh, there we go. But it's not going to the screen. I'm going to let John help me here. I'm technically challenged. I touched
I don't know why it says that.
I don't know. Not a problem. I've learned to work for this before. So what we're looking at is a bunch of different factors. We must have the ability to create solutions that don't harm us. They can't harm our clothes. They can't harm our environment. We secondarily have to have delivery mechanisms, whether that's spray bottles that allow us to keep the solution healthy and stabilized, whether it's power misters that allow us to cover very, very large areas very effectively, or now in the new era. And if you think that COVID is going to be the last airborne virus you're going to deal with, you're wrong. The flu's always been somewhat airborne. But I'll give you another example of a virus that we know travels by air. About 5 years ago, I was honored to sit on the FDA Council for Norovirus Studies called NoroCore. I was the only non-scientist in the country invited to sit in on it. What we learned about norovirus, which is very often not diagnosed properly, they'll say it's the flu. There's a heck of a lot of difference between having the flu and norovirus. Norovirus is a dysentery thing. It's vomiting and diarrhea. That's how it manifests itself. It's not respiratory and aches and pains. But very often it's gotten into our public schools. We used to call it the cruise ship virus. You would go and get on a cruise ship, you'd grab the serving ladles and you'd get it. Now what we understand is norovirus goes airborne. Here's a little secret for you. Chipotle almost went bankrupt because of norovirus. We now know that if one person throws up and they have norovirus A, it'll travel 50 feet through the air. So a guy throws up in a classroom, he'll infect the entire classroom. We have seen whole schools close over norovirus. Germs adapt, germs learn. This isn't your father's germ. This is a whole new set of things. And wherever COVID came from, and I'll leave all that up to other people to determine, this isn't going to be the last aggressive pathogen that we're going to see. Simply cleaning the toilet seats and the door handles isn't going to get it done anymore. The germs have adapted. We must adapt. And it's funny when I talk about this, very often people will say, well, it's really hard to adapt. When the cell phone first came out, cell phones, bag phones, and not smartphones, it took 14 years to get to 90% adoption rate. It took 14 years till all of us started carrying cell phones. Initially people said they're toys, they're gimmicks. The adoption curve for smartphones, 3 years. 3 years. We all use these devices. We all carry these devices. We all employ these devices. But for some reason, when we get down to sanitization or disinfecting, we still think it's a yellow mop bucket and a string mop. Those technologies are all antiquated. All deserve to go to the dustbin of history. We use microfibers. We use single-use pads. We use auto scrubbers. We employ all kinds of technology to make cleaning and sanitizing more effective. Now we're to the next phase. The next phase is cleaning the air. We will all have a new responsibility in life. We will have to realize that unless we want to spend our entire life covered like this, which for me is unimaginable, that if we're ever going to get back to some level of normalcy, we have to be able to scrub and clean the air. The technology for hypochlorous and its generation has come leaps and bounds. It's progressed well beyond what it used to be. In the very near future, we will have access to devices that have the internet to them, that we'll be able to go in and know whether John actually drafted any solution off the machine. One of the other questions I've had is, how long does this last in a bottle? And I'll tell them, well, in ours, we can keep it in there up to 90 days. Oh, that's good. Well, if your custodian has a spray bottle that's staying full for 90 days, we have a different problem with your custodian. He's clearly not doing any work. We need these things to be emptied on a regular basis. Today, there's no way to know that. Today, there's no way to know it because he might fill it, he might not. But what's forthcoming very rapidly is technology that for John to go fill his bottle, he's going to log into the machine. The machine's going to record his personnel code. It's going to tell us the strength of the solution, how it went into this bottle, and whether John came back and refilled it in any period of time. That accountability, that traceability isn't because we don't trust John, we do, but we want to make sure that John has the right information to know where he's going. Apps that simply anybody could use, from the boss to the custodian, and it says, the flu is in your area. Please pay close attention to these areas. Door handles, handle grips, because we're busy. All we need is somebody to just say, give us a little tap and say, hey, by the way, there's this germ that's in your zip code. Where does that data come from? CDC. They've had it for decades. We've never employed it. That's where the future of sanitizing and cleaning needs to go. That's where we're headed so that we can kill the germs without killing us and get a result to have a healthy building. It's my personal sworn goal that before I retire, and hopefully that isn't for any time soon, that the one thing I'll get to take away from my life's work is that I'll never have to hear the word school closing other than for snow ever again. Because there's no need to have school closings. We didn't. There's no need to have this. We have technology, we have solutions that are effective, affordable, and contemporary. Just like this presentation is being partly done on Zoom. We do Zoom meetings all across the world. I did one in Australia last week, in South Africa the week before. But technology is here. We accept it for meetings. We accept it for our phones. We accept it for our cars. Now we need to accept it in the world of sanitizing and disinfecting. I'll close with this. Change is always a difficult thing. The effectiveness of reaching forward and looking for solutions that provide greater efficiency without the compromise is where we need to go. Just bought my wife a new little car. I bought her a little Ford Mustang convertible. She's had a mommy mobile for all of our married life. Minivans all the way along. Kids are grown and gone. She finally said, could I just have something that was fun? I said, tolerated me for all these years, you can have anything you deserve. She said, how about a convertible? Now my wife's a very conservative driver. But you know what, I found this Ford convertible that's got a 4-cylinder engine. And the first thing I said to the dealer is, I don't want some sled. I mean, this thing is going to be able to get up out of its own way. And the guy says, here's the keys. Take that turbo out and see if you can open it up. That turbo is faster than their V8. It's a 4-cylinder turbo. I was so impressed. I went, I guess technology has changed since the last one I sat in the 80s. It was a 4-cylinder that you could pedal faster. Technology moves on. Let R.D. McMillan help you see how you can improve the health of your building, the productivity of your staff, and realize the future of sanitation. I'm here to take any questions. Even if it comes through Zoom, they can type any questions, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Yeah, sir.
Square footage wise, what is one of those?
About 5,000 per unit. And they can typically handle about 5,000. You'll see in here now, it's been running, these two have been running for quite a bit. There's just a little ethereal fog in here. You don't need